7 levels of movies everyone should see at least once in their life. Level 1, Brain Rot. The Room. It's been called the worst movie ever made. With its bad acting, broken dialogue, and scenes that feel like accidents, nothing about it works the way a movie is supposed to. Then, how did a movie this bad become something people watch on purpose? Tommy Wiseau appeared out of nowhere with a mysterious accent, unlimited confidence, and a reported $6 million budget he controlled entirely himself. No studio notes, no pushback, no one telling him no. With this recipe for failure, we got a movie where every filmmaking rule gets broken at least once. Characters vanish, emotions don't connect, and scenes repeat for no reason. And that's the magic. The Room is so sincere, so unaware of its own failure, that it becomes accidentally hilarious. Audiences didn't just watch it, they joined it. Midnight screenings, spoon throwing, call and response lines. It stopped being a movie and turned into participatory art. So even though it might give you a headache, I think this movie is one everyone must watch once,
Yeah, I know. Life is too short.
so you at least know what a bad movie looks like. And somehow, this isn't even the most cringe movie on our list, because our next movie is a sequel so bad, its prequel denies it. Troll 2. This movie is a sequel to a movie about an evil troll that wants to take over the world, but there's one tiny problem. There are no trolls, no continuity, no logic. No one seems to understand what movie they're in. So, how did this become legendary? It starts with an Italian director, an American town, and almost no shared language on set. The villains are vegan goblins, while the acting is stiff and wooden. Scenes play out like dreams that refuse to explain themselves. Even better, the cast had no idea they were making a sequel or even a troll movie at all. Everyone thought they were in a serious horror film. That total disconnect gives the movie pure outsider art energy. Then there's the line, "They're eating her, and then they're going to eat me." That became immortal. Years later, Best Worst Movie, a documentary on the horror that was the making of the movie, reframed it as something oddly beautiful, a failure made with genuine hope. And that hope is why you should watch it. You never know, you just might see what the director saw. Batman and Robin. This is the movie that nearly killed The Dark Knight as a character. Critics hated it, fans rejected it. Even George Clooney, who acted as Batman, hated it. So why should anyone ever watch it again? Because it's funny and cringe. It was also Toy First filmmaking at full throttle. Neon sets, ice puns, bat credit cards. Every scene feels engineered to sell merchandise, not tell a story. The studio interference also wasn't subtle in the movie. Tone, pacing, and character motivation were bent around marketing deadlines. And yet, this disaster mattered. Because Batman and Robin failed so loudly that Hollywood had to stop and rethink everything. Without this movie, there's no Dark Knight, no prestige reboots, and no serious superhero era. It was a bad film. But it was also a historical warning label. And strangely, some people came back to it years later. Weird. So far, these movies weren't good, not even close, but that's the point. They're proof that filmmaking can fail so spectacularly it becomes unforgettable. But what happens when a movie isn't broken, just misunderstood? When it flops, disappears, and then quietly finds its people? That's where the next level comes in. Level 2, Cult Classics. The Big Lebowski. This movie literally created a religion, not a metaphor, an actual one. So how does a plotless movie pull that off? When it was released, critics didn't know what to do with it. The story wanders, the mystery barely matters. But The Big Lebowski isn't about plot, it's about vibe. The dude became a philosophy, not a character. Lebowski Fest turned into real-world gatherings. Dudism emerged as a lifestyle built on acceptance, patience, and not freaking out. Infinite quotability turned the film into an identity badge. If you get it, you live it. So if you want to work on your patience, I recommend this movie, as I believe it teaches patience better than most philosophy books. You either learn through the story, or from just sitting through its non-existent plot. I learned patience from one. But if this movie created a religion or cult, then the next one probably predicted your job. Office Space. This was a movie judged to be a flop. until life caught up with it. So why does it hurt more every year? Mike Judge wrote it from real corporate misery. In 1999, the world was sold tech optimism, open offices, and loving what you do. Audiences weren't ready to laugh at cubicle despair yet. The studio pushed for a softer, more marketable tone, but reality ignored that note. But as office culture spread, Office Space stopped being satire and became a documentary. TPS reports, the red stapler, the printer scene, these weren't jokes anymore, they were shared trauma. At least my trauma. Memes turned into survival tools. People didn't just quote the movie because it was funny, they quoted it because it was true. Cult classics survive because a few people refuse to let them die, but some movies don't need rescuing. They don't grow slowly, they arrive everywhere all at once. You've seen the references, heard the quotes, and absorbed them through culture, even if you've never actually watched them. These are household names of cinema. Level 3 Household Names. Forrest Gump. You've heard the quotes, you know the bench, the running, the box of chocolates, but do you actually remember the movie? For years, Forrest Gump has been criticized for its heavy sentimentality. Some see it as boomer nostalgia, dressed up as history. Others accuse it of emotional manipulation, a feel good story that smooths over messy politics. As audience became more cynical, the film became an essay target. But that simplicity is the point. Forrest's naivety isn't ignorance, it's a narrative device. He moves through chaos without trying to explain or fix it. The film doesn't ask you to agree with history, only to feel your way through it. That's why it became comfort cinema. You don't analyze it, you return to it. And that's why you have to watch it. But what happens when comfort becomes global? Titanic. Everyone knows how it ends. The ship sinks, Jack doesn't make it. So why do billions still watch it? Before release, Titanic looked like a disaster. A ballooning budget, endless delays, a 3-hour runtime. Romance skeptics dismissed it as a melodrama wrapped in spectacle. Industry insiders expected a historic flop. Instead, James Cameron mastered emotional pacing. The film spends over half its runtime making you care before anything goes wrong. When the iceberg disaster hit, the spectacle didn't overwhelm the story, it sharpened it. The sinking works because the intimacy is already locked in. Titanic wasn't just a movie, it was a shared cultural event, watched together and talked about everywhere. I still think no modern movie has held attention like the Titanic. Don't get me wrong, Endgame came close, but it still wasn't Titanic level. Let me know in the comments if you disagree. But unlike both of them, our next movie never left culture at all. The Wizard of Oz, 1939. You already know the story, the songs, the road, the shoes, even the cartoons. So why does this movie still matter? For decades, The Wizard of Oz lived on television. Annual broadcasts turned it into a ritual. The shift from sepia to technicolor shocked early audiences and rewired expectations of fantasy. More importantly, it quietly created archetypes we still use. It's a myth blueprint, a journey away from home to understand home. Companions who represent inner needs, a villain that externalizes fear. Because it's so familiar, it becomes comforting and not boring. Grandparents and children can share it without translation, and that familiarity is its superpower. So if you haven't tuned in to The Wizard of Oz, you can do so with your grandchildren, children, and even your grandparents too. The movies in this level are comforting. You know how they end. You know the music. You know the moments. But cinema didn't evolve by making people comfortable. Sometimes it moved forward by making audiences deeply uncomfortable, and nowhere is that more obvious than in horror. Level 4 Horror Classics. Psycho. It's just a black and white movie about a motel. No monsters, no gore by modern standards. So why did it permanently traumatize audiences, and why does this still matter if it isn't scary anymore? The thing is, before Psycho, Hollywood promised safety. The Hays Code, a strict, self-imposed set of moral guidelines governing American film content, enforced moral certainty. Good people survived and bad people paid. Sex before marriage was taboo, voyeurism was unspoken, and you never killed the main character halfway through the movie. Well, guess who threw all of that into the bin? Alfred Hitchcock. Audiences felt betrayed, like the rules had been quietly ripped up. And this is why I'll always recommend Psycho to everyone that loves cinema. It showed Hollywood that it didn't need monsters to terrify people. It taught cinema that evil can look normal, that violence can arrive suddenly without warning. It also invented slasher grammar, voyeuristic cameras, mundane settings, and final girl DNA. I actually don't think Psycho is scary anymore, but it's unsettling in a deeper way. Like you can see how everything we take for granted now looked rough. This is also why I believe Psycho only cracked the door because our next horror movie kicks it open and dares to be taken seriously. The Exorcist. When The Exorcist dropped, people fainted. Some ran out of theaters. Others begged churches for real exorcisms. How did a horror movie become a cultural emergency? This story begins in the early 1970s when America was unstable, post Vietnam delusionment, a crisis of faith, fear without direction. The Exorcist didn't arrive as a cheap scare flick. It came with serious actors, prestige direction, and medical realism. In the movie, doctors fail first, science fails loudly. Only then does faith enter, uncertain and exhausted. This movie reframed horror as adult and respectable. It proved the genre could earn Oscars and still terrify. Possession imagery, religious ritual, the slow, unbearable burn of dread. Every exorcism movie since lives in its shadow. I think this is the rare movie where the reputation doesn't exaggerate the experience. And I mean it. You'll get scared. So give it a watch this night. But once horror was taken seriously, it started making fun of itself. Scream. By the early 90s, slashers were exhausted. Audiences knew the rules: mass killer, fun equals death. The final girl survives. Horror had become predictable, almost comforting. So, how do you scare audiences who already know every trick? By marketing Drew Barrymore as the star, then killing her immediately. Scream flipped the genre by saying the quiet part out loud. The characters know they're in a horror movie. They explain the rules, and the movie still works anyway. That's the genius. It revived horror by loving it, not mocking it. Even if you hate predictability, this movie resets expectations and makes fear feel alive again. I think Scream works because it respects the audience's intelligence. Horror teaches us how fear works, but fear alone doesn't build cinema. Some films change movies not by shocking audiences, but by showing what the cinema itself is capable of. The next level features films you don't just watch, you study them. Level 5. Technical masterpieces. Citizen Kane. Everyone says it's the greatest movie ever made, which usually means it feels like homework. So why is this still mandatory nearly a century later? Yes, most first-time viewers will feel underwhelmed, as it doesn't look flashy. Nothing tells you where to look. And that's because Citizen Kane hides its technique. Greg Toland's deep focus keeps everything visible at once: foreground, background, emotion, power, without cutting. This is the movie teaching you how movies think. After watching Citizen Kane, I started noticing framing, blocking, and space in every other film. It rewired how I watch movies that even bad movies look different now. The truth is, you don't need to love it. You just need to experience the moment when film language changes forever. The second watch isn't required, but the first is essential. But what if that's not the only technique you can learn? Blade Runner. When it was released, Blade Runner disappointed audiences. The plot felt thin, the pace felt slow, but the images refused to disappear. You've seen this movie, even if you've never watched it. You've probably noticed that every future city looks like this: rain-soaked streets, neon signs, smoke, and darkness swallowing people whole. But besides influencing the sci-fi genre, it teaches that vibes can be storytelling. You don't watch Blade Runner for answers, you watch it to feel a world. Every sci-fi city today is borrowing its language. Seeing it once lets you recognize the blueprint everywhere else: movies, games, and music videos. You don't need to love the story. You just need to experience the mood that redefined futurism. But technical mastery can only prove what cinema can do with machines. Some films go further. They don't just push technique, they capture an entire moment in time. This is why when you think of a decade, these are the movies you're really remembering. Level 6. Era Definers. The Godfather. In the early 70s, Hollywood cracked open. The production code was gone. Directors, not studios, became authors. Audiences were ready for moral uncertainty after Vietnam, Watergate, and institutional collapse. The Godfather arrived at the exact moment America stopped believing in clean heroes.
America's made my fortune.
As a movie that insisted upon itself and somehow earned it, why does this movie feel less like a story and more like fate unfolding? The movie defined the 1970s because it taught patience, consequence, and rot. Power isn't explosive, it's procedural. Violence isn't thrilling, it's administrative. Watching it once recalibrates how you see crime stories forever. You understand why modern prestige TV exists, and yes, The Sopranos is impossible without The Godfathers. It doesn't glamorize crime, it normalizes it, which is far more disturbing. You don't watch The Godfather to be entertained. You watch it to understand how cinema learned to grow up. And 20 years later, Hollywood evolved. Pulp Fiction. Before Pulp Fiction, independent films were niche and Hollywood films were polished. Quentin Tarantino smashed that wall. He mixed art house structure with grindhouse energy and trusted audiences to keep up. The non-linear storytelling was a bit confusing to viewers, but to Tarantino, it was confidence. An action movie that opens with small talk and not gunfire had never been seen before Pulp Fiction. So, how did talking become the spectacle? The reason why this movie defined the 90s is because it made dialogue become action. Style became substance. Watching it once explains why movies suddenly felt self aware, ironic, and referential. You see the birth of modern screenwriting rhythm, as every crime movie, TV antihero, and needle drop soundtrack owes it a debt. You don't need to love its violence or attitude. You just need to see the moment cinema realized it could remix itself and still sell out theaters. But that was the 90s, because back in the 80s, they wanted adventure. Back to the Future. The 80s were obsessed with nostalgia, optimism, and technology. Back to the Future loops all three into one perfect machine. It looks backward to the 1950s while sprinting toward the future, mirroring Reagan-era confidence and suburban fantasy. Just hearing this makes this movie feel like comfort food. So why is it here? How did it become the 80s? It defined the decade because it proves craftsmanship can be invisible. Watching it, you can see every setup pays off. Every joke advances the plot, and watching it once is like taking a masterclass in storytelling efficiency. It teaches why fun is not accidental but is engineered. You may not analyze it, but you feel its perfection, and that's the point. It shows how mainstream cinema can be smart without feeling heavy and why the 80s are remembered as hopeful, even when reality wasn't. So if you're in the mood for feeling hopeful, this is just the movie for you. The films in this level undeniably define their decades, but the films in the next level didn't just define an era, they rewrote the rules on how movies are made, marketed, released, and remembered. Without these, cinema would look completely different. This is the highest level. Level 7. Cinema Definers. Jaws. Before Jaws, summer was where studios dumped movies they didn't believe in. After Jaws, summer became the battleground. That's a big enough statement to define its impact on cinema. But the movie never hinted at being a defining one in Hollywood, as behind the scenes, Jaws was a mess. The mechanical shark didn't work, the schedule exploded, the budget spiraled. Steven Spielberg was forced to hide the monster because he couldn't show it, and that's why it matters. What could have sunk the movie ended up rewriting suspense itself. Spielberg was forced to suggest danger instead of showing it, teaching cinema that restraint can be more powerful than spectacle. Less shark meant more imagination. Add John Williams' score, and suddenly fear became rhythmic, anticipatory, and unavoidable. And when it was released in cinemas, it didn't just scare people out of the water, it changed how films were released. Wide openings, mass TV advertising, urgency, event viewing. The idea that a movie could dominate culture all at once started from here. I'd recommend watching Jaws not just because it's effective, but because it reveals how limitation creates language. You start noticing how modern blockbusters still chase this formula, sometimes without understanding why it worked. But Jaws is not the only cinema definer on our list, because while it sold tickets, the next one sold worlds. Star Wars, 1977. Before Star Wars, films happened on Earth. After Star Wars, films became worlds. When Star Wars was in production, studios didn't believe in it. So, George Lucas traded the money he should have earned for sequel and merchandising rights, a decision that quietly reshaped Hollywood. The movie hit, and suddenly toys, spin offs, fandom, and long term storytelling became the real product. Merchandising, sequels, spin offs, fan communities, shared universes, all of it traces back to that decision. The truth is, George Lucas didn't just tell a story, he built an ecosystem. Because of him, films became entry points. Stories became expandable. Watching it now isn't about hype, it's about seeing the moment cinema shifted from art objects to living IP. You start recognizing the blueprint everywhere: Marvel, DC, streaming franchises, cinematic universes that never stop. Whether you love it or not, watching Star Wars helps you understand why modern cinema looks the way it does. But what if technology itself became the draw? Avatar. Probably a movie no one was expecting in the last level, but make no mistake, it deserves its spot. People argue about Avatar's story and miss the point. I'm not saying this movie changed cinema narratively. What I'm saying is it changed cinema technologically. James Cameron first had the idea for Avatar in 1994, but shelved it because the industry didn't have the necessary tools to execute it. So he waited 15 years for technology to catch up to the experience he wanted audiences to have. At a time when 3D was a joke, he treated it as immersion, not a gimmick. Now, nearly every effects heavy film today is built on systems refined here: performance capture, 3D as immersion, not gimmick, virtual production, digital actors with emotional credibility. They all started from him. After his success, studios realized spectacle could be experiential. Watching it now shows you where modern blockbusters come from: LED volumes, digital actors, and tech first development. It helps you understand why modern filmmaking looks the way it does, why theaters chase immersion, and why technology now drives storytelling choices. Watching it once doesn't just show you a movie, it shows you where cinema is headed and how far it's already traveled. You might not love it, but you definitely felt it. And this is why it has dominated cinema for the past decade. If you like the content, tell me which level you're stuck on. And if you want more insights on cinema like this, hit the subscribe icon on your screen.